You know that I'm...
Yes, sir. It's in my vehicle.
You know that we're doing the right thing.
Did you need to escort me?
You need to go to the park and make arrests.
Okay, so who has their citations?
I'm getting hers in just a second so she gets your ID.
Okay.
Sir, you know we are a federally recognized charity.
I tell you, we wouldn't be doing this if we were not acting under the advice of our attorney.
We have, I know you're acting under the advice of your attorney. We have the authority to be here.
We did not feel like we had firm legal standing.
I understand.
We would not be doing that.
I understand, and I appreciate your service.
That's David Benham, who joins us now here on the show, an old friend of the show. It's been too long, brother. How are you?
Man, I'm doing great. Good to see your face and hear your voice again, Steve.
So I want to give you this. I want to give you an affirmation to start out with, if I could. All right. One of my pastors once described meekness as power under control, and I've never. It's rare in America today when what's masculinity. What's toxic masculinity? See, I don't think there's any such thing as toxic masculinity. I think there's just masculinity and then toxic men, right?
Yeah.
But what does meekness look like? What's power under control? This notion that I have to be, you got to call the jerk store and find out they're all out of me. That's one way to do this, right? Or the other way to do this is just be a complete candied rear end pansy and let myself get walked over. You didn't fall for any of either one of those traps. Brother, that was one of the best examples I have seen in modern American masculinity of meekness. So I wanted to tell you that first and foremost.
Man, that really, I appreciate that. I don't get choked up very often. Wow, that really just touched me right there. I'm just so gripped for my country, Steve, to be honest. And I think about my kids. I think about my children's children. And I've never been arrested a day in my life. And I fought back the tears. And I really hate the fact that you made me cry like that. But we're in a moment, Steve, where, our rights are being taken from us. And I wasn't leading a protest. I wasn't leading some demonstration like they're trying to say that I was. And, men of courage really need to rise up right now. I mean, this is really a gut check for us as Americans and also for me as a believer. What are we made of? What's inside of us? And the fact that I could even be meek and be even considered meek is only the power of the Holy Spirit inside of me and just the Lord working through a sinner like me. And but I'm absolutely just like you and just like millions of other Americans around the world, or around the country, and especially men right now, humble servant leaders. That's what we're called to be. This whole idea of toxic masculinity and all that stuff and emasculating men. Listen, now's the time for men to lay their lives down and be humble servant leaders. So, Steve, I really appreciate you saying that. And I just want to deflect that glory back to the Lord. If he could use me, he can use anybody.
Amen. And, thank you for letting him use you as that example. Take our audience now, give the rest of the backstory here. We told them about this story when it first emerged a few days ago, but refresh their memories, David. The group you were with, where you were at. Yeah. You guys were practicing the CDC social distancing guidelines, things of that nature. Can you just kind of give us the facts of the matter?
And Steve, we didn't even have to practice those because we're an essential organization. However, in Charlotte, North Carolina, the busiest abortion facility in the Southeast, is deemed an essential. All abortion facilities in North Carolina are deemed essential businesses. So under the COVID laws, abortion facilities are essential. Well, also inside the COVID laws, the local ordinances and the state statutes have provisions for private or public charities that provide social services. I am the founder and chairman of the board of Cities for Life, and we are a public charity, federally recognized. We've had over 5,000 mothers since 2010 plugged into our network, and we are there to help them. We are there to help them face unplanned pregnancies by helping them with housing assistance, baby showers, medical needs if they need it, adoption services, domestic abuse issues. We help them through all of these things. So I get a phone call Saturday morning, hey, David, they're threatening our sidewalk counselors down here. Whenever the COVID law came out, we said, okay, we are well within the essential organizations. However, let's go above board and let's go to a skeleton crew with our sidewalk counselors and let's make sure we stay socially distant. So we actually drew on the sidewalk with sidewalk chalk to make sure our sidewalk counselors stayed socially distant with hand sanitizer. We only had 3 sidewalk counselors there. Also, there was a pregnancy center there on the scene with a mobile RV unit where they do sonograms, and they only had 2 technicians there. So I arrived, and I stood across the street. So I was so distant from everybody, and I had my son filming. And the officer comes up to me and says, "Sir, you can't be here." And I said, "I'm sorry. First of all, there's not more than 10 people here. I'm not gathering. I'm not creating a gathering or staging a protest. And we have sidewalk counselors across the street that are all socially distant. And in addition, we are a federally recognized public charity. You cannot tell us to leave." And he said, "Sir, I'm going to tell you to leave." And he says, "And I wouldn't do this if I wasn't acting under the advice of my attorney." And so I'm telling you, he's getting advice. The police are getting advice from those folks above them, and they're coming together and they're going after Christian, pro-life Christian voices, and they're trampling on our rights. And so that's why I said in the video, as you continue to watch it, I said, if it's really about 10 people gathered, go to the park and make the rest. I was looking inside the abortion facility. There was way more than 10 people. They're in the waiting room there. Nobody's socially distant, and yet they're targeting us simply because of our message. That's why they're targeting us.
The reason I wanted you to lay those facts out, David, is because we're having a lot of conversations right now about what does Romans 13 mean? What does it mean to honor the king, as Peter says? What does it mean to honor the civil authority that's been established by God, as Paul says? What's the context of that? Because I think one of the key phrases in that chapter is to give honor to those whom honor is due. Right? Right. That the reason Nero cut Paul's head off is Nero demanded an honor from Paul that Nero wasn't due. Paul was willing to honor every other civil law that Nero put upon him, including house arrest. He did it all, okay? But when Nero demanded a level of honor that belongs to the Lord and not to him, Paul said no, and that's why he lost his head. Yeah. And so there's this idea that we, again, another false choice. We either become these persistent zealot rabble-rousers, troublemakers, never satisfied. We protest everything, even the sanitation tax, everything, okay? Or we just become little statists with Bible verses and do whatever Caesar says because that's the proper reading of that. Yeah. What I see you doing there, it is first, Paul says, when at all possible, live in peace with everyone.
That was where I was going. Yep. That's right. You took it up. You took the initiative to grant the state accommodations it wasn't even asking for in order to be a peacemaker whenever possible. But then ultimately, when it said you must quit your ministry, that's right. When the only answer therefore is you're not owed that honor, and the answer is no. That's exactly right. And, it's funny, when you started talking about Romans 13, I was about to say, well, the context of Romans 13 is Romans 12, where it says, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. So as far as it depended on Cities for Life and our organization, we practiced social distancing and went above and beyond what we had to do just because we believe we're in a global pandemic. We support our government. We support all of these things. I don't want anybody getting sick. I'm practicing social distancing myself with my family. So we're not rabble-rousers. I'm not trying to hurt people. We had 1.8 million people hitting our Facebook page, and I can't tell you, the overwhelming majority supports us, but there's just so many people, and I call them pixie stick Christians, that are like, you need to just stay at home and you need to care for your neighbor. And I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. First of all, if you go to a grocery store, you're putting people in danger. Don't throw your virtue signaling on me. But we were practicing these social distancing, and we were doing our dead level best to be at peace. And I tried to reason with that officer. And I knew it wasn't the officer. He's just acting based on what the mayor's office, the governor, the city attorney, and the city council in Charlotte, and unfortunately now the Charlotte Observer, they got together after my arrest. they get together and they circulate this story that I led a protest of 50 people, literally. I mean, you saw me there getting arrested. There wasn't anyone around me. It is just crazy what they're trying to do.
I think what's been fascinating to watch is the social experiment of all of this. How we've been warned in the past as believers in this country that the God-given freedoms that we have, the God-given rights that our government acknowledges, not to take them for granted, that they can be taken away. And I think we have forgotten what generations of believers going back to those first Puritans that got on the Mayflower, what they had to suffer and sacrifice to create the notion of a country founded on rights that come from the God of the Bible. Therefore, no man-made government can take away that which God alone ordains.
That's right.
What it cost them and those generations, those framing generations, to pass this on to us. And I think what's been fascinating to watch in a tragic way, I'm not shocked or surprised by the petty tyrannies. I mean, that's government throughout the ages. You know, the father who was playing t-ball in a 40-acre park, just him and his daughter, and he gets cuffed to a pole in front of his kid, stuff like that. That's history. History is full of this level of tyranny, petty to otherwise. Yeah. What I think is fascinating in a tragic way is as fast as you can lose your freedoms, apparently you can give them up even faster.
That's exactly.
And that's what's been shocking to me is, now over the last couple of weeks when more and more data is coming in showing a lot of these models are frankly questionable at best. When I even just was studying them, doing what I do for a living, data analysis, research, and I'm like, I don't think this math adds up. I don't agree with their assumptions. The amount of people who came to me and said I wasn't even permitted to ask these questions. Now, here's the thing, too. At the same time I'm doing it, David, I didn't let my kids go to their grandparents' house across town for 15 days to make sure they were symptom-free when they came home from school. We bought a month's worth of groceries. We've sanitized our house at least 3 times. So I'm actually doing what they're recommending me, but I also have the right as an American to question why you're imposing on my freedom and to make sure that your rationale adds up. Now, more and more of my audience is saying to me, keep doing it. But when I first started doing this, there were plenty of people in my own audience that said, why would you even dare question the experts? As if we're under the reign of some plutocracy and not free men and women.
That's exactly what we're seeing. And, was it not Stalin that said, probe with the bayonet? If you meet mush, push it through. If you meet steel, pull it back. And that's what we're seeing right now. It's like probing with the bayonet. It's like we're just giving it up. Like okay, trust the experts. I don't do that for my marriage. I don't do that with my kids. I don't do that with my own personal health. I get multiple opinions, but we are just giving it up. And Steve, I think it's really interesting, given the context that we're having this conversation of me being arrested in front of an abortion facility. I really believe rights and responsibility are tied together. And we want our rights, and yet, especially we as believers, are not exercising our responsibility to the most vulnerable among us. We have drastically, as Americans, changed and altered our behavior to protect ourselves. But will we drastically alter our behavior when we come out of this to protect the most vulnerable among us? The statistics of the unborn being killed far are greater than the statistics of the COVID crisis issue that has taken lives. And while this is a global pandemic, we still can't give our rights up. And so we're seeing just huge government overreach. I mean, just utilizing, was it Saul Alinsky or Rahm Emanuel? I don't remember who said, never let a crisis go to waste. Mm-hmm. We can't sit by. That's the reason why I was so gripped with tears. It's just like, we can't sit by. I don't want my kids to grow up like this. So we have to stand now. That's why I'm so thankful. I come on a show like yours and I see the headlines and the banners and everything about standing for truth and all of these things, because the knowledge of the truth is what's going to set us free here.
You're sitting there in North Carolina, heart of the Bible Belt. Billy Graham Association. You can't go there. You can't take your family there on a Good Friday or an Easter to remember the greatest evangelist probably in the world in the last 100 years. You can't do that. I can't go and take part in the church's sacraments on Easter. And I understand that the church is not a building, David. I understand that I'm an evangelical. I understand the doctrine of the priesthood of every believer. I also understand, though, that God commanded his people to build him tabernacles, temples. The New Testament says, don't give up meeting together. So this idea that this is just can be done into perpetuity virtually is just not, I don't believe, a biblical notion either. But I'm not arguing necessarily for people to open all their churches up. The point I'm making is I can't go and take part in the church's sacraments this Easter in North Carolina, in the heart of the Bible Belt. But I can go to an abortion clinic and take part in the state's sacrament of child sacrifice.
Yeah.
Now, you could argue that maybe I shouldn't be allowed to do either one, or if I can do one, then I should be able to do the other, I guess, from an opposing worldview standpoint. What you cannot, though, as a Christian abide, in my view, is that you can do the killing, but not the worship. You can say, hey, in a pluralistic society, we have a political process where we iron out these differences, and that's why right now both of these viewpoints are being accommodated. I don't necessarily agree with that to that extent, but you could say that and be reasonable. You could say, you know what, right now it's not safe for you to go either place, so don't go. You could say that and be reasonable. But as a believer, how can you consider it to be reasonable that I can go and kill my child, but I cannot take my child to receive communion on Resurrection Sunday? How do I reconcile that as reasonable as a believer, David?
You can't reconcile that as reasonable as a believer. Like we said at the very beginning, as far as it depends on us, let's be at peace with all men. We're not talking about these big, massive social gatherings. However, Home Depot, and this is just a very simple way for me to think about this. You go to Home Depot or Lowe's here in North Carolina's Lowe's everywhere. That is deemed an essential business, where any type of household thing that you might need. And so I went there right after I was released from jail on Saturday. I went to the Home Depot with my wife. There had to have been 1,000 people there. Everybody all squunched up to each other, getting plants and carrying trees and lawnmowers and bags of mulch and weed killer and all this stuff. And you know what struck me? Psalm 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, those that build it labor in vain. If doing household chores is essential, then the house of our heart, then the house of worship is essential, even more so. So look, like we said, I'm not saying we got to all mass gather together, but the very essence of biblical Christianity is community. And so what we're seeing is a separating of community. And so once we start seeing, like, it seems to me, Steve, and now I'm kind of a little going off topic here, jumping on a soapbox, but it sure seems to me like
it's the Steve Deace Show. Everybody listening and watching is used to it. Go ahead.
But it sure seems to me, and I'm not a pontificate or a pundit or any of this stuff, but it sure seems to me that they really, the governmental leaders pushing this are really kind of excited about shutting down the houses of worship. And then hearing Mayor de Blasio say, okay, well, synagogues and churches will shut you down for good, but they leave mosques open. Mm-hmm. Look, I'm not targeting mosques, whatever, but don't be targeting the Christians in the synagogues then. So, I mean, this is
you can still go ride the subway in New York City right now, David. You could ride it in New York City right now, but you can't go to church.
And you can go to an abortion facility and you can be in that waiting room around all these people, and you walk out of that facility. And we've been doing this 10 years. Over 5,000 mothers have chosen our services. I've watched this over and over and over again. They'll walk out after they get an abortion. They walk out. They have no one to help them. None. They don't have, Planned Parenthood's not helping them. The abortionist is not helping them. But guess who they need help from? Us. Whether you got an abortion or not, you get help from us. And the thousands of sidewalk counselors and pregnancy centers all across this country are doing this. And so what the governors are doing and what the mayors are doing is they're saying, you know what, ma'am, facing the unwanted pregnancy or the unplanned pregnancy, you can go and get pregnancy. You can go and get an abortion, but we're going to take away the rights. We're going to take away the services that are going to be there for you when you need them. That is cruel. That is vindictive. That is just straight up demonic, and it's wrong. So we have drawn a line in sand. We are not going to move. We're going back there every single day, and they're not going to stop us.
Dave, before we let you go, let our audience know how they can follow you guys' work. I think you and your brother, I think I saw on Twitter, you guys just launched your own podcast or something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
So by all means, self-promote. Our audience is used to that too.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for that. Hey, I'm an identical twin. Everybody goes, where was your brother? And I'm like, well, he's a coward. No, he wasn't. We just launched Expert Ownership, how to own a business without it owning you. And now we pivoted through the COVID crisis. It's an online course, how to own a business in the midst of an economic downturn, maybe even an economic meltdown. And so that's my brother and I, we're small business owners. We've had hundreds of offices and we help business owners thrive in the midst of all this. But you know, Steve, it's not about just making income. It's about making an impact. And so when all of a sudden this happened, Jason said, David, what are we going to do? And I said, bro, I'm going down there. And he's like, okay, go for it. And I'm so thankful that, you know what? I don't love my business. I don't love my online course. I spent hundreds, thousands of dollars producing it very well. It's got all kinds of amazing help for business owners. But you know what? When I heard that trumpet, I was like, there's something inside of me, Steve, that is far greater than wanting to make income and having all this image and image and income and influence. And if I lose all of that, it's okay. I'm going to be a voice for the voiceless, and I want to stand with courage. So thank you for letting us promote it. Go to expertownership.com or benhambrothers.com.
Good to see you, brother. Tell your brother I said hello. All right.
I will.
And we won't wait too long before we do this again. Okay.
Thanks, bro. God
bless.
you.
Happy Easter. Okay. Take care.